Welcome back to UK Pro Writers. Today, we have a fascinating topic to dive into: the impact of sanctions on Russia and Ukraine and how it affects global trade. This is a crucial subject, as it influences international relations, economic stability, and trade dynamics. So, let's get started by discussing why this research is so important. Importance of the research. The research on the impact of sanctions on Russia and Ukraine and their effects on global trade is of paramount importance due to its potential to inform critical international policy decisions. Understanding how sanctions influence trade dynamics not only contributes to a deeper comprehension of geopolitical tensions but also aids businesses and governments in mitigating economic risks. This research bridges the gap between diplomacy, economics, and trade, offering insights that can foster stability and prosperity in an increasingly interconnected world. Real-world example 1. The impact on European agricultural trade. In the aftermath of Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, the European Union imposed sanctions on Russia, including restrictions on agricultural imports. As a result, European farmers faced substantial losses, particularly in sectors like dairy and pork. This real-world case underscores the tangible economic repercussions of sanctions on a specific industry and highlights the need for nuanced policy responses. Real-world example 2. The energy sector and the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. The Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, connecting Russia to Germany, has been a subject of controversy and sanctions. The threat of sanctions on companies involved in its construction has complicated the project's progress and strained diplomatic relations. This case illustrates how sanctions can influence not only trade but also major infrastructure projects and international energy security, making it a critical topic of analysis for global stakeholders. Chapter 1. Introduction. Chapter 1 of a research study typically includes the introduction to the research problem, its significance in the broader context, and an overview of the research questions, objectives, rationale, and the scope of the study, providing a foundational understanding of the research's purpose and relevance. Chapter 1 of any research project is crucial as it sets the stage for the entire study. Let's break down the key components of this chapter. Research problem. The research problem revolves around understanding how economic sanctions imposed on Russia and Ukraine influence their trade relationships and, consequently, affect global trade dynamics. Research significance. This research is significant because it sheds light on the geopolitical and economic consequences of sanctions, helping policymakers and businesses make informed decisions. Research questions. Sample research questions. How do sanctions impact Russia and Ukraine's trade patterns? What are the spillover effects of these sanctions on global trade? How can countries navigate the challenges posed by sanctions to maintain international trade? Research objectives. Sample research objectives. To analyze the impact of sanctions on Russia and Ukraine's trade volume and composition. To assess the ripple effects of sanctions on other countries' trade relations. To propose strategies for nations to mitigate the adverse effects of sanctions on their trade. Research rationale. This research is justified by the increasing use of sanctions as a tool in international relations and the need to understand their multifaceted impact on global trade flows. Chapter 2 Literature Review. Chapter 2, the Literature Review, encompasses a comprehensive review of existing scholarly work and research related to the topic of study, presenting relevant theories, models, and previous findings. It also identifies gaps in the current knowledge, justifying the need for the present research and setting the stage for the subsequent chapters. Chapter 2, the Literature Review, is where we gather insights from existing research. Here are some suitable subtopics and examples. Sanctions theories and models. One theory often applied is the coercive diplomacy model, which posits that sanctions can influence a target country's behavior by imposing economic costs. For instance, the sanctions on Russia over Crimea demonstrated this. Literature gap. While many studies focus on the immediate effects of sanctions, there's a gap in research regarding long-term trade impacts and strategies for mitigating them. Chapter 3, Methodology. Chapter 3, the Methodology chapter, details the research approach, design, and methods employed in the study, including the conceptual framework, research philosophy, data collection techniques, and ethical considerations. It provides a clear roadmap for how the research is conducted and helps ensure the study's rigor and validity. Chapter 3, the methodology section, outlines how the research is conducted. Here are some key considerations. Conceptual framework. Our conceptual framework includes 3 independent variables: types of sanctions, their severity and duration, and the dependent variable is changes in trade volume. Research philosophy. A pragmatist research philosophy is suitable for this study as it allows for a mixed method approach. Research approach. An inductive approach, starting with specific cases of sanctions and exploring broader trade impacts, is suitable for this complex topic. Research strategy. A case study approach, analyzing the sanctions' effects on specific industries or countries, would provide valuable insights. Data analysis method. We'll use a mixed method approach, incorporating both quantitative data on trade volumes and qualitative data from interviews with stakeholders. Ethical considerations. Ethical considerations include obtaining informed consent from interviewees and ensuring data privacy. For instance, we'll protect the anonymity of businesses sharing sensitive trade data. Limitations and delimitations. Limitations include the availability of accurate trade data, while delimitations restrict the study to sanctions imposed during a specific time frame. Chapter 4, data analysis. In Chapter 4, we conduct data analysis based on our methodology. Here's how it's done. Quantitative analysis. For quantitative analysis, we collected trade data from 20 countries over a 5-year period, with a sample size of 500,000 trade transactions. Qualitative analysis. Qualitative analysis involved thematic coding of interview transcripts from government officials, business leaders, and economists. We conducted 30 in-depth interviews. Chapter 5, conclusion. The conclusion chapter summarizes our findings, highlights their significance, and suggests areas for future research. It's important to wrap up the study effectively. In addition to summarizing the findings and their significance, the conclusion chapter also serves as a reflection on how the research has addressed the initial research problem and objectives. It offers closure by emphasizing the broader implications of the study's outcomes for both academia and practical applications, reinforcing the importance of the research in the field. Chapter 6, recommendations. In the recommendations chapter, we provide actionable insights based on our research. For instance, countries should diversify their trade partners to reduce vulnerability to sanctions. Suggestions for future research. Future research could explore topics like the role of sanctions in cyber warfare or the impact of sanctions on specific industries like energy and agriculture. And that wraps up our discussion on structuring your research on the impact of sanctions on Russia and Ukraine on global trade. Stay tuned for more insightful content, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for updates. Thanks for joining us today.